Welcome to episode 6 of Around the Tavern. Today, the guys talk about one-shots, single adventures to have in Dungeons and Dragons. Make sure you don't miss characters that should have been at the end of the show. Without further ado.
Welcome to Around the Tavern with Chris and Steven. I'm your host, Chris, with my co-host, Steven. Steven, how are you doing?
I think I'm even more tired than I've ever been.
Uh-oh, Steven's tired again. Steven, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody what we're getting into today?
Well, this podcast is going to once again cover content from across the Dungeons and Dragons Multiverse, right here from our cozy tavern. Today's topic is one-shots. Let's talk about containing a D&D adventure into a single session.
Now, Steven, one-shots? That's
one kill.
One shot's one kill. You got it. That's exactly what we're talking about. No, we're talking about one shots. I don't know if there's any other terminology in the D&D community for a one shot other than like a one session, or I don't know. I've always referred to them as one shots. Steven, have you heard them called anything else before?
I don't know. Maybe you would call them like a single session adventure. Maybe just adventure. I mean, I tend to think of like multi-game. Like, for me, multi-game campaigns just keep going on and on. They're just campaigns that never end. So, a game that very obviously is never going to happen again. I guess that's as best you can do.
Okay, that's fair enough. One way that it's one way to introduce people to D&D. You kind of gather everybody up and you're like, hey, we're all kind of new to D&D, so let's do this one single adventure. Make your character. Let's do it. Let's have fun. And for me personally, that's how I got into being a dungeon master, is doing one shots, and that's all that I still do as a dungeon master. One shots, because I like to have a very specific story with highly detailed locations, cool NPCs, and I feel for a one shot I can kind of control the level of detail that I can throw at a story without feeling it might get wasted. So that's why I prefer doing one shots when I DM, and I've done a few one shots as a player, but for most of the time I usually play in just full campaigns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the advantage obviously of one shots is there's no expectation of more than just the single experience, so you can definitely get away with, doing some real crazy stuff, and there's not going to ever be an adventure that follows this, so there's no consequences.
Do the wacky stuff now, and there's no repercussions, because that's it.
And you don't have to feel bad about killing people, because that also doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're gone.
They're never going to come back to this character.
And one thing that I love to do, Steven, that we'll talk about in a little bit, I love to theme my one-shots around like holidays or events or time of year. Like I did a Halloween theme shot I did a Halloween one-shot last year. And then I planned a Christmas one, and then I did like a Thanksgiving, fall, autumn one. That's my favorite thing to do, is theme it to the time of year. I don't know if you've ever done any one shots, Steven.
I've actually played in this one campaign that I'm currently playing in. The Dungeon Master will often play themed. Kind of one shot isn't really the right term because it's happening in canon of the story of the game, but we'll almost always just get, oh no, you're sucked into a portal, and now it's Christmas time.
Oh, kind of like a side adventure with the already built character. Oh, that's a cool idea. I love that idea. Mm-hmm. And kind of like one shots are sort of the same thing as campaigns. There's a lot of pre-made material. There's a lot of official, short campaigns you can run. But my favorite is homebrew. But before we touch on our own homebrew ideas, Steven, I found two official, already planned one shots. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't want to think of anything because I don't like thinking, you know what, me too. You can Google these, and it's an entire planned adventure that you can use to run for your friends for a good Saturday evening. Now, the first one is called Frozen Stick. It's a free adventure playable on D&D Beyond. And basically, it's like an ice-themed place. And it's just a cool ice adventure. And that one's on D&D Beyond. Now, the one that I thought was really funny, Steven. There's one called The Wild Sheep Chase,
Mm-hmm.
and basically it's just a wacky adventure where you chase sheep and wacky things happen, and there's not much, you know, and what's the word, Steven? There's not like, it's not super intense, it's not dark, it's not gory. It's just a wacky, silly adventure. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit wacky, silly, just good, goofy, gaggy time, look up The Wild Sheep Chase, one shot adventure,
Mm-hmm.
and that sounds like it'd be fun. But those were the two that I found that would be fun as far
Mm-hmm.
as already made adventures, Steven. But there were so many. There's list upon list upon list, and you don't have to just go, D&D official beyond. You can do adventures that other people have made on like Reddit. You can find all sorts of things on blogs, Pinterest, all over the place. But forget other people, Steven. This is our podcast. This is Around the Tavern with Chris and Steven. This is Chris and Steven's fun, stupid adventure ideas. Steven, would you like to tell me about a one shot that you've ran in the past?
Well, first of all, let me add that yeah, Wizards of the Coast doesn't really publish single play adventure experiences. They're really more into campaign settings and resource books that you can use to play multi-session games. But if you're looking for a really quick and easy way to get a bunch of like already written games to play, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, I used to play a lot of Pathfinder Society, and those adventures, I would say, are very well structured for a single play game. You might have to bump up their content a little bit as far as length is concerned, because they're basically meant to be played in 4 hours or less. Sometimes they run over more, but mostly they're designed to take up to 4 hours. So they really work well as long as you can do a little gymnastics to make the story a little more disconnected from the greater story that's going on in Pathfinder Society. And you can get those. I mean, they're only a few dollars, and it's a pretty good deal. But so wait, what was the question?
So what I asked you, Steven, what is a one shot that you've read in the past? Something you've DM'd that you put thought into, and you're like, hey, let me tell this good one story.
Uh-huh.
What was that one shot?
Well, people are gonna think I have some sort of phobia, and maybe that's true, but I ran an adventure where I just got all my regular players just to build a new character of a certain level. And they were just a group of mercenaries hired to solve a problem at a local butchery. That was just going gangbusters. People were going crazy over this butcher's meat, maybe a little too
Hey,
crazy.
yo.
Can you guess what happened, Chris?
I'm going to go down serial killer pathway, and it was like human and like, no, wait, let me guess. It was some sort of like vampire butcher, and it was human
Uh-huh.
meat. Is that right?
You're close.
Okay.
Maybe instead of vampires, think horses. Maybe Steven is scared of horses. Who knows?
So, okay, was the butcher the horse, or were they
So no.
selling horse meat?
So they were selling meat, but they were selling the meat stolen from, basically, in the story of the world that I play most of my games in. All of lycanthropy is it's created by these god beasts that are basically, like the paragon, like the original creatures of their respective kind. So there's this god beast of horses, who is trapped. It's held in stasis by like a silver spike that's been jammed into its head, and there's this almost
Oh.
cult kind of business that's sprung up where they're just hacking off pieces of this giant god horse thing and selling it to customers. But little do they know that that would be a really slow way to mass inoculate people with lycanthropy, and people are starting to go a little feral, go a little crazy. They all craving that flesh. But the nature of this horse god beast is that it infinitely regenerates its flesh, so there's an infinite supply. And when they get down to the bottom, they find this werehorse butcherman who has gone full feral,
Okay.
and he's just cutting into this beast and serving up some hot slices.
Well,
Do you
you know
want to
what?
do you want to guess what happened to the players that were playing this one shot?
I don't know what happened to them, but before we go further, I'll take a slice.
Oh, okay. You'll take a slice of that.
I'll give me a slice of that, Steven. I'm going to guess that they died.
Well, they did die, but how they died is kind of
Nice.
fun. So they defeated the werehorse butcher. He had this gigantic, like, two-handed cleaver, and after they slayed him, they were just kind of dicking around. There was still this giant horse buried in this cavern underneath this butchery. And one of the characters was like, "Oh, well, I'm just gonna go take out the silver spike." So he did that.
Oh no.
The thing that was holding the god beast in torpor, and then that thing, it just chased him down and killed him.
Understandable, but I mean, good thing it was a one shot, right?
It allowed me the opportunity to make some truly terrifying horse noises.
Oh, can we bear witness to that, please?
Yeah, kind of like a
so
kind of stuff.
So if you're listening to this episode right now, in reference to Steven's phobia of horses, our Halloween special we released on Halloween, Steven took us on an adventure where we went through this spooky, scary place to find our own horse that had turned into a vampire horse. We killed our vampire horse and then fought this other scary vampire horse. So scary, and Steven just has people kill horses.
Yeah, maybe
so give that a listen.
Maybe I just desire the death of all horses.
We get it, Steven. You didn't like My Little Pony. It's okay.
All right, well, Chris, if you're so great, what's your one-shot adventure idea?
Oh, if I am so great. I am so great. I was born great. So, Steven, picture this. It was like, it was last year or something, right?
It was December of 1935.
The year's 1972. I wasn't born yet. Okay, scratch that. It was like last year. It's Halloween. I get a few of my friends together and I say, "Hey, it's Halloween. You know what we do on Halloween?" They go, "No." And I was like, "Well, what we do on Halloween is we throw a Halloween one shot." Bam. I decided to do this Halloween themed one shot, Steven.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it was one of my first times ever doing a one shot, and I was totally winging most of it. But I threw myself into the idea of this Halloween one shot. I said, "All right, you're not making the characters. You guys just show up with Halloween foods and plan to sit at a table for like 4 to 6 hours." So they show up. I had 3 pre-made character sheets for level 6 goblins, and then I basically randomly assigned them their goblin characters and then gave them like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes to look over what they had, what their goblin was called, what their goblin class, race, or well, not race, their goblin, Steven.
Mm-hmm.
Basically gave them a couple minutes to figure out what the logistics of the character were, and then I started off the one shot by having them sit around a campfire and talk to each other in character as goblins, doing goblin things for like 20 minutes. And they were sitting there pretending to be goblins going, "Ooh, I stole this shiny thing." And pretty much I had the goblin chief come over and go, "What were you guys doing just sitting there? I told you to go rob this house." And sent them on this long journey through this, dark forest in the middle of the night to go rob this house, basically on the orders of the goblin chief.
Mm-hmm.
So they go, they're going to break into this house. They easily make it through the front door, which there was a guard at the door. The guard assumed they were supposed to be there, so it kind of just let them in. And the goblins, being too dumb to question anything, they went right into the party, or not the party, into the building, Steven.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're searching the rooms, they're looting things. They run to one creature, murder him. no questions asked, just straight up murder him. They still, like, his wallet, there was a picture of his family in there. They took it. Then they go to another room. They murdered a werewolf, Steven. They killed him. He's gone. He's dead. Took his wallet too. And then as they're going through this like scary looking house, they come up to the kitchen area. They go in, and there's a whole bunch of like homunculus in the kitchen. And I made them like, wait staff and like a couple of chefs in there making like this gross, sloppy like stew. They murdered all of the wait staff and the chefs. Everybody gone. So basically they're just being these little horrible goblins going in and murdering everything in this house, stealing what they can, which, that's what goblins do. And as they're going through the house, they come to this large open room, Stephen, and bam, there's a death knight in the room going, guys, what are you doing? This is my Halloween party. You've come in here, you've slaughtered all of my guests. You're not leaving alive. So then they had to fight this big demon knight or death knight, and that was kind of the big boss of the whole Halloween adventure. They barely beat him, and then as soon as they land that final blow, he turns into a cloud of smoke, and they're gusted out of the house with this magical like wind, throws them right out on the front porch, and then the death knight appears on the porch going, "Happy Halloween!" And then that's where I ended the session. So. Nice. I'm pretty great. That was the greatest Halloween one shot, I probably in the entirety of the world, Stephen.
It could have been.
It could have been. It definitely was. I gave myself a big ol', number one trophy for that. Totally tooting my own horn all the time. You know how that goes. Yeah. So like that, like I said, that was kind of one of my first one shots, and that wasn't the greatest retelling of the whole story. But pretty much, I made all the characters and just threw them into this little goblin story and made it real spooky. Mm-hmm. And that's probably my favorite one shot that I've ever ran. But I've, like I said, when I DM, I only do one shots, so I've done a good handful now. And one consistent theme that I definitely like to do, Steven, is like canonically all of my one shots happen in the same world. So I've got like this big overarching world. I call it Arcaria. Now all the one shots that take place in this world don't happen necessarily in the same time period, but they're set in the same world. Ooh. So there's elements of like, the Goblin Forest took place near the Volcano Mountain. And then another one shot I ran took place in the desert on the far, left side of the map. I don't know. It's just a cool little detail that I throw in all my one shots is they're in the same place.
Well, it sounds like you're getting real close to just starting a full-blown campaign there, Chris.
No. No.
No.
It's a bunch of random stories that just happen in the same place. Okay, so another thing that I love to do with my one shot, Steven, and you can have the mic back here in a second. You can ramble in a second. It's my turn. I like to reference one of my favorite characters I've ever played, Hefty Stonebridge. I play that dwarf barbarian for almost a year, and he's been my favorite character I've ever played. So I name drop Stonebridge all the time. So if you're playing in one of my one shots, you might go into the Stonebridge Tavern, or you might, run into this long lost descendant of Hefty Stonebridge, and his name's Dave Stonebridge or something. I throw in a little reference to my favorite character when I'm DMing for other people.
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to self-insert is just force people to constantly interact with your favorite characters.
Have you ever done that, Steven?
Usually if people are coming across never characters I've played, I don't think. I think I'm usually inserting important NPCs that I like the most in my other games.
I heard this question the other day. Have you ever used a player's character from a different campaign in another campaign or a one shot? So say you're playing with like Dave, and then Dave played in your other game, and Dave had a sexy half elf, would you reference that sexy half elf in a
I
different
would
game?
I would only ever reference them. I don't think I would ever, insert them into the story.
I've never done it because I never thought about it. Um, outside of using my own characters, because I
Mhm.
don't think I would feel comfortable with going, okay, I'm going to use Dave's sexy half elf and then not tell Dave about it, because what if I use Dave's character and then Dave's like, what the heck, dude?
No, it's too bad. It's canon.
No, it's canon. Yeah, sorry, Dave. Your half elf was too sexy, brother.
Now he
What
now
can
he
I
has no
say?
legs. It was an unfortunate accident.
It's still sexy though. No legged half elf, sexy as can be. That's all. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Uh-huh. I think we know who Chris's next character is going to be.
Hey yo. So I kind of mentioned one of my one shots. Steven, do you have another one that you ran that you really liked and you wanted to maybe mention so people can
Oh,
steal your ideas?
I'm still working on more horse related horror adventures. Another one shot I did. Well, for a sequence of weekends, I did do some one shots where I made a bunch of pre-built characters and just dropped them as groups into the castle you can find in the Adventures to Ravenloft and to Castle Ravenloft. It was fun, and I think people had a good time. But the problem with it's just such. I mean, you can't possibly uh, really have a good time exploring the castle in just one go. Um, so yeah, that's really the only other. I mean, unless you want me to talk about Pathfinder Society, I can do that all day.
Nah, let's keep on going. So,
Okay, no, all right. It's sorry. I'll talk about one. All right, so there was one of. It was actually the first adventure that I ever played, and it was an adventure called the Library of the Lion. And
uh-huh.
basically, you're dropped in by this society of adventurers to try to do a little recon, a little secret covert information gathering. So you sneak into this library, which is hidden underneath an opera house. And basically, the entire adventure is you going to different rooms, doing a variety of skill checks, trying to uncover clues. And I think what I liked most about the adventure is that, first of all, the best you could possibly do in the adventure is never fight anything. And I that was it was just really exciting to be like, oh, when's the combat gonna happen? The combat never happened. We talked our way out of one combat, and then we were clever enough not to open a display case, which would have animated a bunch of books to attack us. So we skipped that combat. And it was just really fun, just getting to like tiptoe around this library, just combing through pages, and yeah, it was a really fun experience. And I've run that adventure I think 2 or 3 times, and I think everybody had a good time in all cases.
Yeah, that definitely sounds fun. Like doing a small adventure that's not combat based. I like to throw puzzles into my one shots. Like, probably I'd say 70% of my one shots are just going to be puzzles and riddles rather than encounters and combat.
Mm-hmm.
Because, usually with one shots, you're not going to be hyper familiar with your character or what all you can do, like combat wise.
And
So I don't make combat heavy in my
when
one
you're
shot.
doing a single play adventure, you really don't have time for more than 1 or 2 combat encounters anyway, because those tend to really drag out their gameplay time.
Yeah, unless you just fudge the dice.
Oh,
I mean, I don't do that. I don't fudge the dice as a DM. No, not me.
oh my gosh, Sandra, another critical hit. You kill that goblin too. Wow, look at you.
Yeah, and it's a lot of at least for me, Steven, whenever I run one shots, it's kind of like, okay, you guys are fighting the big boss. Oh snap, I made him too strong. Okay, you dealt 12. Wow, that actually dealt like 36 on my paper here.
Well, when they're the epic heroes of destiny, then yeah, they deal double damage.
Yeah, of course. And yeah, I'm still kind of new to being a DM, and one thing I still struggle with is kind of balancing encounters. So, like this last one that I ran, it was a party of 3, and I made them all level 3. And I had them fight a mummy lord at the end, Steven, and I
Mm-hmm.
did not make that mummy lord match a party of level 3 or 3
Woof.
level 3s. Yeah, it was. I definitely fudged that big boss battle, but I didn't make it obvious that I was fudging it because I let that mummy lord do some good damage and made them really get on the edge of their seats.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's more important. It's just kind of with a one shot is not necessarily balancing the entire thing super well. More so just kind of making sure your players are having fun. But I guess that can be comparable to running a campaign too. What do you
Mm-hmm.
thought? You agree with that, Steven? Am I right? Am I wrong? Am I sounding like a doofus right now?
Well, I never fudge the dice, first of all.
Oh, okay,
But
sure.
yeah, it can be really hard to scale the difficulty, especially if you plan on having like 6 or 7 players and Timmy and Joanne couldn't make it this week, so no. I mean, if your numbers get cut in half, it can be really a little difficult to scramble and change the way everything is balanced.
So, do you have any maybe like tips, tricks, or helpful advice for running a one shot?
I would confine the adventure to a single map. If you can't draw it on one single page of graph paper with generous room for notes, then you're probably planning something that isn't going to fit within a single play adventure, and you're gonna need to cut it probably in half. And definitely don't plan on playing for more than 4 hours. I know, Chris, you said your game ran to like 6 hours, I think.
Yeah, usually my one shots run anywhere from minimum to 4 hours to 8 hours.
Uh huh.
But I like to plan ahead, and I tell my players like, hey, you're coming over for this Saturday. I will provide the food, and we're just gonna literally have a binge marathon of playing D&D. So you're stuck at my house.
Yeah, I would say it takes an uncommon level of commitment for players who are willing to sit around for basically an entire day.
That's what you could. Well, if you can only play like once a month to once every quarter, you got to really get it all in there in one sitting.
I
I
guess.
usually tell people that are playing in my one shots, it's like, hey, we're planning this 3 months in advance. Go ahead and ask for the entire day off, and like that's all we're doing. And if we're planning that far in advance, you be there. You know what I mean?
I know.
But like, I think that's a different level you can have with a one shot because it's just a one time play of that adventure. So
Hmm.
it's easier to not block out a whole day for D&D rather than a campaign. Because I play in some campaigns, where we play for max 2 hours. And back when that one was consistent, we'd play, every single week. And then there are other ones it's like once a month, and we play for more like 3 to 4 hours.
Uh huh.
Um, but
Yeah.
I'd say maybe a tip or trick or advice from me. If you're planning the one shot, um, stay organized. That's one thing I really struggle with. Is like I like to make digital maps, and I do a lot of hands-on things for my one shot. So like if there's a riddle or if there's a note, I'm going to make a physical note that I can hand to the players. Um, But if you're planning a one shot, stay organized with your notes, whether it's like in a notebook with tabs or if you're on your computer. Make sure you're filing everything like nice and neatly because when it comes to that day of when you're finally playing or running that one shot for your players and you can't find the one picture you forgot to print off, it totally sucks, Stephen. um, Now, where do you usually start your players if you're running a one shot? Do you start them at what level, Stephen?
um. Well, I usually make the characters for them. But I mean, 3 through 5 is a good place to drop characters because you don't have too many options. Uh, the higher level a character is, the more options they have, and generally the longer combats tend to drag out. So I think a low level is best for a character that you're not going to get to really get to know, and
Ever come back to?
Yeah, we'll never see again. Possibly get eaten by a horse, who knows? And so you should definitely keep the levels on the lower side. I think anything above 10 might be a little hectic.
Too
And
crazy.
yeah, so I usually make the characters for them, and in that way I usually just end up doing whatever I want. I'm like, all right, well, this character has 10 HP, but they've got 4th level spells or something. I'll usually build in some sort of inherent strength, some sort of advantage that they can use to their advantage, but then I'll usually also build in some pretty glaring weaknesses.
That is something that the more I keep making one shot, Steven, I think I'm only going to make their characters from here on out. Having them make their characters and show up and not really fully know what they've wrote on those character sheets, horrible. It's horrible. I hate it. So from now on, I think for one shots, unless they're fully experienced players like some of my other friends, I don't think I'm going to run one shots where I let them make the character. Does that I don't think that sounds harsh because you just said you do that.
Yeah,
I
and
think
you
it's
just
kind of a better way to keep control of the environment.
and maybe if you give the character spells, maybe they don't have as many other abilities, passives or whatever, or if you're just like, all right, well, this guy's a gravedigger, but oh my gosh, can he certainly put the hurt on undead? So maybe he gets an ability that gives him extra damage to undead. But so make characters that are balanced, but maybe also when you're building like custom characters, you can kind of get away with doing whatever you want. You can give them abilities that aren't found in any of the player's handbook classes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good point. And there's a lot, probably we aren't thinking about telling you when you run a one shot. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to run a one shot, definitely just do whatever you think would be fun, man. Like if you want to run a silly story about chasing sheep and you want it to be super kooky and crazy, just do it. There's no rules. I mean, follow the base Dungeons and Dragons rules and you'll probably be all right. Which a fun thing, this episode is coming out pretty close to Christmas, so you know what that means, Steven.
You have a gift for me?
Oh, no. I don't have nothing for you. This is slightly Christmas themed. So one fun thing me and Steven we wanted to do here is we wanted to present an idea that you guys could run as a one shot that's kind of Christmassy themed. So, Steven, I'm going to let you take this away and present the Christmas themed one shot idea for the listeners to use. Oh, wait, that's spooky. Christmas isn't spooky. Ho, ho, ho! Christmas theme one shot idea. Was that any better?
Yeah, well, I mean, no, let's not lose the spooky ookie. So in this adventure idea, and it's an idea I've kind of bounced around in my head for a while. You have the players, and you give them, or they create whatever characters they feel like, and you start them out. They're in a terrible blizzard, and they are, they're starting to get a little bit of frostbite. They're gonna have to make camp for the night, and they do. And unbeknownst to them, they died in the night, in their sleep of hypothermia. And then they awaken the next morning, everything covered in snow. They have completely lost their bearings, but in the distance, there's a small little snow-covered village. There's still heavy snowfall coming from the sky. And they approach this village, and they discover that it is beset by two Christmas entities. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Krampus, Chris.
I have.
But there is basically in this village, there's a Christmas demon and a Christmas angel, and they're it's a little hard to tell which is which. Maybe some villagers come at you with some cryptic hints like, "Oh, I can hear the bells coming now," but both of the creatures have bells, so who knows what's going on.
Okay. So what's the goal here? They gotta fight both of them.
Well, they come
across
this village, and they're supposedly being terrorized by some sort of Christmas demon. Presumably, the characters would want to figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, probably. But what's the outcome here, Steven? They meddle. They start looking around.
So they start looking around. They start meddling, and they're finding all of these villagers. Some of them have been given gifts recently, but they all, they have some sort of, monkey's paw twist where even if the gift might seem like, a boon, it was actually a bane. And, I got coal in my stockings. That's actually the best outcome, because hopefully, unless the coal catches on fire and burns you alive, you can't hope for much better. So the adventure would probably conclude with them receiving gifts from one of these entities based on their actions, but also they would discover that they themselves are dead and they are trapped in this eternal Christmas wonderland.
And it's all a snow globe.
And the demon was a horse the whole time.
And the demon was the horse who possessed the snow globe of eternity. Okay, so yeah, that is a Christmas or winter themed one shot idea that you guys can use. You can claim it's 100% original. You made it up. Steven doesn't care. Steven doesn't matter, just still his ideas. Add things, take things. That's the fun thing about doing one shots, in my opinion, is you can just be as creative as you want and go into hyper detail. And if you mess it up, it doesn't matter because you're only doing it once. And, it's just kind of, it's my favorite way to be like, bam, creative moment. Okay, let's move on. Mm-hmm. And, Steven, if you don't have any other topics, ideas, or conversation points for anything one shot related, we can move on to our next segment.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So that's a yes. You don't have anything else to say.
Yes.
Ask Steven question. Mm-hmm. All right, Steven. So following the main or the big topic of the week, that leads us to our Reddit question of the week. Steven, today I'm going to ask you one of the kind of more thought-provoking questions I found on Reddit that I think kind of has a complexity to it that's, there's an easy answer and then a not easy answer, So let me just jump right into the question. Steven, do you as a DM allow taboo topics to exist in your game world, such as slavery, rape, racism, and etc.?
Well, this is something that I think everybody should definitely think about. It can be really easy to say, oh, well, the player characters frequently murder. Murder is certainly the worst thing that could happen. But I think there's a certain suspension when it comes to playing video games, and that, yes, you are some kind of hero who has to slay evil monsters. Sometimes that includes, the beggar who accidentally walked into your halberd, but who's to say? But as far as some more, let's say, triggering issues like rape, I've heard horror stories of DMs who have forcibly impregnated their players. I can only imagine the sort of
Steven, this is a podcast, but I just opened my eyes so wide, dude. That's a real thing?
Yeah, I can only imagine the sort of twisted motivations that would make a DM think, that's where the story has to go. It can't possibly go any other way. So rape, I don't think you need to include it in your adventure ever. That seems like a given. Slavery, there are fantasy races within Dungeons and Dragons that are just canonically slaves to other races. Obviously, I don't think you need to insert any, let's say, surrogate African, American style slaves. If you're going to introduce slavery into the adventure, then obviously, your players are going to be there to do something about it. I wouldn't allow any of your players to, enslave a human for any reason. That seems a little twisted. But yeah, the most important thing is that you need to talk to your players. you don't need to surprise them with rape, slavery, or I don't know. This is so far out. Like, you don't need to introduce these sort of things that might. If you're seriously upsetting any of your players with the game, then you're definitely not doing the right thing.
Yeah, I came to the same conclusion. I personally don't think I would ever include these as a story mechanic, but I can say for certainty, I can say definitely that I would not let my players do any of those things. Like, I would not let players, engage in any of those activities. Like, no, you don't need to. And if you do that, you're out of the table. That threw me off that you said like it's a thing you've heard of DMs forcibly impregnating
That was only
player
one.
character.
That was only
I mean,
one. Yeah.
Still, that blew my mind. Like, I thought, like, I know that the world is a dark place sometimes, but holy, like, some, and this was a really, when I found this question on Reddit, there was a lot of responses, and it was going all sorts of different ways. Some people were like, it's fantasy, do whatever you want. But I feel like there's a level of like compassion and empathy, and the time of age we're in just is not necessary. And I feel like there are some elements that you could use, like slavery in story for an element to overcome, but I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah, if it's
like,
not something you've seen in a Final Fantasy game, I don't think it's something. It needs to be rated E for everyone.
yeah, pretty much. And like I told you, like, all the other questions beforehand have been slightly lighter questions, and this was a slightly heavier one. And I've asked other people outside of the podcast, and luckily, I'm glad it's all been kind of the same consistent answer of no. But well, I guess it's not surprising that people are pro for this on Reddit. Not everybody, but in
what a
the
surprise!
discussion
People
feed
on
for this.
people on Reddit are pro grapes.
Yeah, and it was just it was a question that I feel like I already would have known your response, but I wanted to hear your answer as somebody who's been playing for a long time. And I've never encountered a DM who would use elements like that in a game, and I know I would never use elements like that in a game. It was just an interesting topic that was worth discussing, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's our Reddit question. Thank you, Steven, for answering it.
You're welcome.
Do you know what's next?
No. What's next?
It's Steven tells a joke. No, I'm joking. It's Steven's boss battle.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay. No, get more excited. Do it again.
Steven's boss battle.
Yay! This is what everybody tunes in for, Steven. Like, everyone loves Steven's boss battles.
I'm sure they do. So, Chris,
well, take it away. Yes.
So we've been talking a lot about vampires lately. What kind of vampire do you want me to talk about this weekend?
An aquatic vampire.
An aquatic vampire? Chris, no. First of all, let me just go ahead and say that use underwater combat as little as possible. It's a huge pain in the ass unless your characters have freedom of movement. It's just a really bad time for everybody. Don't let your characters ever go into the water ever.
But what if it's a dolphin that's a vampire that can walk on land?
Yeah, sure, Chris.
Well, this isn't Chris's boss battle, so Steven, you can take the mic.
All right. Well, so instead of a vampire, that was a little bit of a fake out, Chris. Imagine what do you know about the Kuatoa?
The little fish people.
The little fish.
I've put them as the bad guy in a lot of my one shots because they're just little fish folk. The Kuatoa, they're like the little fish people. I think they like live in like clans and like a little bit swampy areas.
Mm-hmm.
So that Halloween one shot that I mentioned, the one where they go in and they murder the guy and they find the briefcase with a picture of his wife and kids. That was a Kuatoa. I had it as like a full Kuatoa dad, and then like in the briefcase was a photo of like his fish wife and his fish daughter, and they just murdered him.
Hmm.
So that's all I know is they're like little fish people.
Yeah, well, one kind of important aspect of them is that they worship all sorts of eldritch undersea gods, and it's sort of a weird thing about them in that their gods don't really start exist until they start worshiping them, and then sort of their like collective belief sort of manifests a deity like entity into existence. So in one village in one of my games, there were some Kuatoa who had been getting up to no good, kidnapping some miners deep in the mines. So the adventurers, they had to venture down into these mines, and after a few skirmishes with some Kuatoa, they discovered a huge cavernous underground village on the shores of this, dark undersea lake. And uh, at one point, some of them were actually captured by the Kuatoa and were later rescued by the other party members. But they discovered that the miners were not being, kidnapped for some mundane reason, like they were just being cannibalized or something. They were actually being taken to an altar kind of on this precipice overlooking this lake, and they were being ritually sacrificed to one of these Kuatoan gods. Can you imagine what this god was?
Um, a potato with a smiley face.
Yeah, you're very close, Chris. Very close. Only instead of potato, think fish the size of. How big was the fish? I think it was a gargantuan-sized creature. So the
Ooh, that's
players,
a big fish.
so the players, they came across this ceremony and they thought that the victim was just going to be, like, oh, the priest is going to take out a dagger and just stab him. But instead, the priest grabs the victim and hurls them off of this precipice, and then you
Oh,
see this titanic fish mouth just envelop the screaming individual and then go crashing back into the lake. Um,
mhm.
and I presented enough of a horrific, the players in this adventure were relatively low level, so they were wise enough to say, no, let's beat feet. But Chris, if you were running this as maybe the end boss of some adventure, maybe you've beefed up the players a little bit. They've come down here to vanquish some sort of ultimate evil. Let's say the players have killed the priest, they've maybe stopped this sacrificial ritual, but then they're left with this conundrum of what are they going to do about this giant fish god located beneath this town that they're helping. But they don't have to think about it for long because the fish comes, kind of horrifically like flopping onto the shore, like a fish that's sort of voluntarily beached itself. But then
Yeah.
its body starts to twitch and convulse, and these creepy little like crab like legs, like these crustacean
Ugh.
legs start like sprouting from
Uh-huh.
its underside, or maybe from the top of its head and the bottom, so it starts crawling around like a flounder.
Okay, okay.
So
Gross.
so now they have to deal with this giant, fishy crab monstrosity. It's staring at them with those blank fish eyes. And for this monster, I think at the time I ran it as a dragon turtle, which if you ever looked at the entry for dragon turtles in the monster manual, they're quite scary. It's quite scary. Blah blah. Quite scary.
Quash Querby.
They are quite scary aquatic creatures indeed. So if you can find some way to, you can always give this fish god thing the ability to spontaneously mutate, just for extra horror. Like, oh well, you cut off some of its legs, so now it grows some octopus tentacles, or maybe octopus tentacles just start spewing out of its mouth and starts grabbing people and stuff. Make it really interesting, and like this entity is incredibly unpredictable and sort of unknowable in a deep sea kind of way.
Well, I've got one thing to say about it, Stephen.
Uh-huh.
I could take it.
You could take it. One shot, one kill.
I could take it. Yeah, you can't see me right now, but I'm flexing on this fish god because I could just one punch man him. Like no effort, no sweat on my part. He's gone. He's toast.
Nice.
Nice. Steven, as always, a wonderful boss battle. And as we go to wrap up the episode for today, do you have any final thoughts, words of wisdom, any advice, any final Steven words for today?
Well, I've said in the past that if you want to play D&D, you're the man now, dog. You gotta run the game. One shots are a great way to, dip your feet in the water, so to speak. You don't have to write everything yourself. You don't have to come up with your own maps. There's an infinite wealth of resources that you can plunder on the internets for all sorts of adventure ideas. And don't be afraid to just, come up with a very simple story. Like maybe there's a haunted house. That's all you really need.
Yeah, I wanted to one shot about a haunted house. I don't know if I told you, Stephen.
Well, that house wasn't haunted. They were having a very lovely party until the goblins arrived.
It was a Halloween party. Ha, 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 ha. But, Steven had a really great point there. Just, do it.
Yeah, just do the dang thing.
Just freaking do it, boy. Go on, make that story, son. But yeah, this has been our big topic of the week. We talked about one-shots, wrapped it up with a Reddit question, and Steven's aquatic boss battle.
Finally got your aquatic battle, Chris.
Finally got my aquatic battle. It wasn't a vampire.
I dragged it up on land, though, so it doesn't count.
So it doesn't count. Thank you guys for listening, as always, and make sure you stay tuned. At the end of this episode, we're going to have another interview for characters that should have been. And remember, at the end of this season, me and Steven are going to pick our favorite, and they're going to win the very first Around the Tavern Award. And if you've missed any of the other previous interviews, go back to episodes 2 through 7, and you'll get to listen to all the awesome, fun, super interesting interviews from other people. Steven, it's time to leave. It's time to close the tavern.
Time to go. Your families are waiting at home. Last call. No more drinks. Everybody out.
Everyone get out of the tavern. Pay your tab first.
No money. Everybody get out. Everybody must leave. We're converting.
Steven, we're trying to make a profit here. We're trying to make a profit here. All right, we'll catch you guys next time. Goodbye. Welcome to Characters That Should Have Been, a contest series where people introduce characters they've made but they've never got to play. Today I'm interviewing another one of my friends, Johnny. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about you? I just got back from a trip to CVS, so I'd say I'm in a pretty good mood.
I got off work, so, I'm doing great. And I'm glad that you're here to join us for the interview. How long have you been playing D&D?
I'd say about 4 years. I've actually been playing more like homebrew tabletop role-playing games for a lot longer, but I really started getting into D&D itself a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm. And would that put you playing only 5th edition, or have you played any of the other editions?
I've only ever played 5th edition.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. 5th edition is a great one to start with and kind of learn the game. So today, the whole contest idea is bringing a character you've never gotten to play. Who have you brought for us today?
All right, so today I have brought to you my lovely boy, Sir Percival. And now I would like to go on the record and say that his name was not inspired by the Carolina Panthers mascot. It was solely a coincidence that I heavily regret after the fact.
Well, even if it was, I think that'd be a reference that would go right over my head. So let's go to just jump into the backstory. Tell me the backstory for Sir Percival.
Yes, so he is definitely not a knight. He likes to think that he is. He comes from the desert, just absolutely middle of nowhere, very small village. And he was a very respectable fellow. I would say pretty average all around kid, but he really started getting in with the wrong crowd and trying to, impress people, be someone that he's really not. And he ended up disgracing his best friend, and actually the backlash from it was enough that he was completely exiled from his town. And so using those skills of deception and putting on a face, he took up the job as a traveling salesman. He would say he's a salesman. He's definitely just a con man, sort of a Reagan Arataka type vibe, if you may. He did take up the bow and arrow. He is a ranger, in fact, but most of his skills stem from wordplay, and he's a very, very short fellow. He likes to think that he's tall, but he's not. So I would say that he's a very headstrong, courageous to a fault type person. But deep on the inside, and he wouldn't tell this to anyone, it's just because he's very, very afraid and very regretful of what he's done in the past.
So, he basically puts on this whole personality, this persona, and he just is going out in the world like, look at me, I'm the big, strong knight,
Yes, exactly. Hence the name, of course. He has a variety of oddities that he sells in his shop, whether it's, monster parts or random elixirs or tonics or whatever. Next to none of them are actually legitimate. Of course. But, he spends his life traveling through the desert and really just, wandering most of the time until he manages to make his way to the next town over.
Yeah, so you would say he's almost like the Wish version of a cat boy. So like, hey, you want this item? I've got this thing. And it's like the off-brand of the off-brand version of that item.
Yes, absolutely. He is straight up selling you the Wish brand. He's got that Amazon storefront where like the shop name is just a series of numbers and letters.
And all the reviews were made by him and his mom, just typing away on the keyboard.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. He is, in fact, a cat boy. I did have a chance to play him singular time in a session, and it was delightful, but unfortunately the campaign got dropped. Never really got to fully flesh out his character in the way that I wanted. Everyone thought he was a tabaxi. He is not a tabaxi. He is simply just a little dude with cat ears.
Oh, so are they like real cat ears, or is it just like a little human man wearing cat ears?
No, he, I never really fleshed out where it came from. I always pictured him as sort of one of those desert cats that are incredibly long and very spindly. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can kind of picture that in my head, just kind of walking around in a trench coat like, hey, you'll not buy this.
Yeah, exactly. And I really tried to base him on his design. I can obviously, unfortunately, the folks at home will be unable to see this, but my friend Luca created some really beautiful art of him. And I tried to base his attire and sort of his appearance off of like Persian traditional culture. Once again, that was not meant to be like because he's a Persian cat or anything. These things are all simply falling into place. But he's got sort of if you've played Breath of the Wild, Link gets these very interesting sand boots, which you think would just be like flip-flops or something. I mean, it's hot out or whatever, but very knee-high, very tied with a bunch of laces and leather straps and everything. He's got a coat on that sort of ties behind his neck, or I guess a cloak, you would say. Of course, he's got his trusty bow and arrow strapped behind his back. He does have a fun pair of boy shorts, because, of course, got to go for that cowboy vibe.
Yeah,
but all of it's very ornate, very richly colored, jewel tones. He's got this dark hair, and this sort of like amber colored skin, very freckled from living in the sun for so long.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like an interesting character. Do you want to talk a little bit about the campaign you're going to play in? Do you know anything more about it? I know you said you got like one session in, and to me that counts as not getting to play if you get one or two sessions in and never getting to play the character again.
Exactly, and it was one of the first times I'd ever played D&D, so here I was thinking that, I mean, we went on a very traditional sort of opening mission, like, oh, you meet in a tavern, and, you know, you go to this place on a job and everything, and I thought that was really all that D&D was at the time, because before I had just played, like, homemade paper games with my friends and my family. But, you know, now that I've been playing for longer, it's amazing the amount of time it takes to really dig into a character. And I didn't really get that for him. But our campaign was still very fun. The little one-off session that we did was, I don't know if it was supposed to go anywhere, but we were set, it was Christmas time, and it was set in this sort of ice maze, I would say, like a festive version of a cornfield. And there was this competition going on where people were breaking off into groups at this very traditional wintertime hunt. And so me and my friends banded together because we had nobody else and sort of ganged up and went on this basically treasure hunt / hunting trip / at the end, of course, there's a big bad ice monster. It was lovely. I mean, people I played with, I've known since I was little, so it was a great experience, but obviously wish it got fleshed out a little more.
Yeah, now, do you have any more like cool fun facts about the character? Maybe little ideas you had for the backstory or little character traits or, you know, any kind of weakness maybe?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think, fun fact, I've had this idea, and I really don't know where it came from, that he really likes collecting spoons. And he's gone to all these places and he just picks up junk and sells it at a very high inflated price. But, anytime he finds a spoon, he just latches onto it, and he doesn't know why. I think he just likes them. But I love the idea that if you were to bump into this man on the street, thousands of small decorative teaspoons would just pour out of his pocket.
He's almost like a little wind chime. You bump into him the wrong way and it's just clink, 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 clink.
Yes. Oh, exactly. I think his weakness definitely comes from the fact that he doesn't really want to admit to himself what he is, He's built up this entire personality, this front. And, if he takes a minute to really think about it and where it comes from, I think that all of his strengths just kind of fall apart. So
yeah, if he was to actually acknowledge all everything that made him who he is today, he would kind of crumble as a character.
Yes, absolutely. And so when people challenge that, he gets really defensive. Maybe even like lashes out. I don't think he's the type of person to jump to violence. I think he took it up because he had to. But, obviously using those defense mechanisms is a way to avoid the fact that he disgraced his friend, who was actually another player in my campaign.
That would make for an interesting party dynamic.
It did. It was very interesting because we didn't know that we were going to be meeting each other. And so there was this strange, I don't know if you would call it homoerotic, but this sort of like enemies back to friends going on that made for a really lovely like gameplay experience.
And they were roommates. I mean, they were party mates.
Yes, they were definitely, best friends as a child, and then one gets popular and the other one's kind of left in the dust type people.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting to have little details like that when you're creating stories, and then your DM can use that to kind of flesh out the story or, add some filler episodes. I love little details like that.
I completely agree, especially because, I think a really good DM can take very small details and extrapolate on that and make it something really big and wonderful. I I mean, obviously, we're in a campaign together, and our DM does an amazing job of that.
Oh yeah, that's a fun campaign right there. That hefty stone bridge. We won't jump into that during this interview, but yeah, me and Johnny, we play together in another campaign, so it's a great dynamic there, and we'll definitely enjoy playing with everybody. And so if you have anything else to maybe drop about your character before we wrap up the interview, maybe one more little detail.
I honestly don't think so. I was, like I mentioned, playing. This was deep quarantine when I made this character. And my daily escape was logging onto Breath of the Wild. I am going to be honest, and this may sort of push me out of the nerd community, but I have never played a single Zelda game before in my life until I played Breath of the Wild. And God, it just really changed my life. So I think I really wanted to capture that feeling of someone who's totally, I mean, both physically, which I guess is a metaphor in of itself, but just metaphorically so small in their own world and having to sort of conquer that in a way that they've never had to do before.
Yeah, it's really cool when you draw inspirations from movies or games, and trust me, I've done it a lot. I've been playing D&D for going on 8 years now, 3.5 to 5th edition, and even when I'm DMing, I take small details from movies or characters or games that I've played to just create more and more and more. So it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I would agree. It's I have DM'd a lot for very small children. My stepbrother is a couple years younger than me, and he would ask me to come up with campaigns on the fly, and it was always, some episode of the Adventure Zone that I twisted and turned into some weird tale or something that I read about in a book. It's always fun taking inspiration from other parts of your life.
It sounds like you've been a player and a dungeon master before. Do you have a preference for which one you do?
That's a great question. I think that I really enjoy both. I would say at the moment, I am definitely more of a player than a DM. I think when I am ready to DM again, or I have that position, I'd have to do a unbelievable amount of research before I jump back into it. Because when I was younger, nobody really cares. You just wing it and people go along with it. But
well, that's still what you do as a DM.
Oh God, amen. Being a player, I think what's really helped me is really delving into like the mathematical aspects of it and like the stat building aspects of it. So I would say I really like being a player more, just so that I can explore different avenues of that.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you for joining us here today for this interview and for the contest. And we definitely enjoyed hearing about your cool little cat boy who is conning people in the desert. I mean, we've all been there, right?
Oh, I mean, do it every Tuesday. That's my week.
Oh, yeah, whether you're getting conned or being the con man, that's life. But thank you again, Johnny, and everybody who's listening. Thank you for tuning into our episode of Around the Tavern. I hope you enjoyed the big topic of this episode. We'll see you guys next time.